Howdy, and thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about phase separation on E10 gasoline and how that affects your outboard motor and the components that it has and basically your fuel system in general. I'd like to preface this with normally I do fishing and side imaging sonar videos, but it's 21 degrees outside and, well, I'm just not going out there. Also, rebuilding some carburetor, and we'll get into that. First thing, gas problems. If you're not having any issues with fuel, good on you. I'm always going to get that one person who says, well, this isn't a thing, it doesn't happen, I don't have these issues. 90% of the time that person uses his motor a lot, burns through a lot of fuel, and fills up often. That is by far the easiest way to negate this issue. If you burn through a lot of fuel, you're probably never going to have this issue. Second thing, if you're here, you probably have water in your fuel, or you've experienced what you possibly think is phase separation with the ethanol and gasoline mix. You've seen a lot of videos probably already. You've gone through, you've seen some quick fixes, some this and that about how you can do things like go to the mechanic and he can run it through a system that'll remove moisture and then put that fuel right back into your tank. That's neat. I personally don't think it's much more than a parlor trick with this new type of fuel that we have here in America. It's well, that's exactly what it is. It's a parlor trick. There's more going on here. They've had E10 fuel, ethanol blends all over the world for many years. Other people, systems are built around it. They don't have as many issues, but that's not here. You're going to experience this eventually if you're a boater or a fisherman. So, what are the symptoms that you're going to have? Before I get into anything crazy here and start showing you what it looks like and this and that, let's talk about some symptoms. You start your engine and it doesn't want to idle, or you have to put it in fast idle to get it to warm, and when you put it back in idle it dies. Or you're on the lake, you're booking around at full throttle and it starts to slow down and you have to constantly move your throttle around to alleviate that issue, and eventually you foul your plugs. When it comes to fouling plugs, most every boat on the water is a two-stroke. There's a lot of things that can do it. Bad thermostat, your heads don't get hot enough, or they stay too cold, or they get too hot, or they stay too cold, and you don't reach the appropriate temperature on your spark plugs. Bad mixture, bad jetting, carburetor settings, timing settings, a lot of things. But here we're just talking about the fuel issue. I want you to remember this: fast fuel, air, spark, timing. If you're having issues with your boat and it doesn't want to idle, or you're always moving the throttle around, try this. Shut the fuel off, drain the carburetor bowl, spray some starter fluid, pass the throttle plate and start it. And if it starts right up and is ready to rock and roll, well, you have a fuel issue. Spark issues, air issues, and timing issues, they can all give similar problems, but it's pretty dead set that if it'll run off starting fluid for a brief second but not off the carburetor, then you're going to have fuel issues. Carburetors are old technology. I get it, but they work. And in a good, well-tuned motor, the first turn of the key, that guy should just come alive and be ready to rock and roll. Once it's nice and warm, you ought to be able to just hit the throttle. Minimal hesitation depending on how your setup is. And once you're on plane, it should run beautifully, and you shouldn't have to do too many throttle adjustments. This isn't a dirt bike engine. You don't need to feather the throttle every now and then to minimize fuel buildups or whatever they want to call that. So, let's say you're having this issue. Well, it's too late for stay-bill. You're not going to be able to dump some of that in your gas tank and fix this issue. It's just not going to happen. I'm going to show you now what it looks like and what exactly phase separation is. Right here I have an old NyQuil bottle, and if you look in the bottom of this bottle, you can see what looks almost like a lava lamp of sorts. We have amber colored liquid in the bottom and what looks like two-stroke gasoline on the top. What has happened here is the ethanol has separated from the gasoline. Ethanol and gasoline do mix. Ethanol, unlike gasoline, will bond to water. It will hold 0.5%. Don't hold me to that, but I'm pretty sure it's 0.5% of its own weight in fuel or oil or water. And once that happens, you'll induce phase separation. So if you're that guy who's running his boat all the time, you may be having some issues like this, but it doesn't induce the separation of fuels, and you burn right through that water. It goes right through your fuel system. You never even notice it. Everything runs cherry. So once again, we have ethanol here on the bottom and gasoline on the top. You can see the two-stroke oil mixed with the gasoline. Oil and water don't mix. So that's what you need. That's what you're looking for here. Is where's the oil? Where is not the oil? Oil and water don't mix, so the ethanol that holds water is not going to mix with the gasoline. Now, some people say, oh, you can shake your tank. That'll get a good mix again. Oh, I'm going to shake the piss out of this. And let's see what happens here. It looks good right now, but it's really cloudy. Gasoline should never be cloudy. That's another indication. Cloudy gasoline that's been shook around has some type of phase separation, and you can start to see the ethanol collecting at the bottom again. So when you add stay-bill, you can add the amount, or you can increase the amount of water. This is what this product's doing, the stay-bill. When you add it to this mixture, you increase the amount of water that this can absorb before phase separation is induced. So, long-term storage, it does help. But if you leave the vent open on your gas tank, which most do, it's only a matter of time. And that time is it goes by pretty quick. Only a few days to get to this point. So what was going on with my engine? Well, I was out on the water, ran fine at the house, take a buddy of mine out. I haven't seen him in a while. Figured I'd show him a boat. Oh, she didn't want to idle. I could get it started in fast idle. It seemed to run around the lake just fine, but it didn't have quite the punch or power it used to. So what happens when this is in your tank? Well, the ethanol's getting sucked up first. The ethanol doesn't have oil in it. It's a two-stroke. It needs oil. So you're burning ethanol mixed with water. It's going to have a close to what the original mixture had of octane, so you may not get any pinging, and it may sound just fine, but you're not burning oil, which is bad. let's say, oh, I'll just run all this ethanol water mix out of my tank until everything's fine. Well, part of this phase separation is you lose a high percentage, or let's not say high, let's say a decent percentage of the octane in your actual gasoline oil mix. That's bad. Your modern outboards are set for certain pretty much high ragged performance or ragged edge reliability. They need a certain octane. Mine asks for minimum of 87, but recommends 91 or higher. Doesn't even say how high it can go. I imagine 93 is pretty much the limit, though. I would for. Necessarily, octane doesn't mean power. Octane just allows you to advance your spark timing. A lot of people argue on that. I work in the marine industry. I put big ships out to sea. I sail big ships. I don't need. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into that. Anyway, so here's the bad gasoline. I've got 4 gallons of it, and it all looks just like this. You shake it around, you take a sample, you're gonna get this exact same idea. So basically, 10% of that 4 gallons is a water fuel mixture that is not satisfactory for the engine I have. So let's talk about this a little bit more. What can I do to prevent this? Run your boat, run it hard, burn that gas, get some new gas in there pretty regularly. I can go and buy a fuel water separator. Well, you can, but fuel water separator doesn't separate ethanol. Ethanol is bonded to the water. So, like we said earlier, 0.5% of, and if you put stable in, it's going to hold even more. 0.5 up to possibly, I'm not going to get into the numbers. It's going to hold a lot of water. The stable allowed it to hold a certain percentage before phase separation occurred. Now phase separation has occurred, and you decide you're just going to go and run it ragged and burn everything up, and your fuel oil water separator is going to, or your fuel water separator is going to solve that problem. It's not. It's designed to separate water from gasoline in this instance. There are special filters for water and ethanol. They are mostly found at gas stations. Condensation within fuel tanks. Gas stations have this problem just as much as any boater. They have special filtration systems in place to take care of that. Some of them do, not all of them. So your fuel water separator is it's a good thing to have on your boat, but it's not going to solve your problem here. Let's talk about what can happen to your motor and the fuel systems involved. First off, to your motor, it's a 2-stroke. It needs oil. Or in this instance, we're talking about a 2-stroke. In a 4-stroke, it can burn this stuff a little bit better. Most modern 4-strokes are going to have some kind of knock sensor. It can determine if the engine is experiencing detonation from low octane fuel, and it'll back off the timing. So your 4-stroke, you may notice it doesn't have as much power as it used to. It's not good, but you're going to run into one of the problems you're going to have on a 2-stroke. This has got water in it, sometimes more than the system can handle. You're going to get a stuck ring. It's going to be rust. You're not going to be able to just look down the spark plug hole and see this, but there's a chance that you're going to get a stuck ring or some other component inside is going to rust, and you're going to cause detrimental rebuild type of damage from this. So, what else can go bad? Fuel lines, not so much. If you experience this and you have phase separation and probably more water in there than you can handle, well then flush the fuel lines with fresh gasoline and they're good to go. And if it'll handle gasoline, it'll handle oil when it comes to the fuel lines for the most part. Some not so much, but the modern ones, yes. What won't deal with this well? Well, carburetors and fuel pumps. I'm going to go ahead and replace my fuel pump. This is what I have. This is a new one. A lot of guys see this on their boat, and they just know it's a fuel pump. What is this? How does it work? Well, here's your inlet. It's got a screen, and here is basically what's a vacuum-driven aquarium pump. I want you to think of it like that. An aquarium pump puts out bubbles, but this pump doesn't put out bubbles. It puts out fuel and oil mixed together. How does it do that? Well, I'll show you. Here's the old one, half of it, and the other half. These are, let me put this spring in here. Right here you can see a rubber gasket. It's not referred to as a gasket, it is the diaphragm. I have this main line this larger line right here. It goes to this machined out portion of this block. Diaphragm covers it. A little spring and cover plate covered that spring, and the second half of the pump sits on top. There's more to it than this, but this is the basics. There's a little equalizing spring that uses atmospheric pressure to aid in this process. The basic idea is this line right here connects to your crankcase. As the pistons move back and forth, they create a vacuum. This is the same vacuum that draws gasoline through the carburetor, past the reeds, and into the intake ports. This same vacuum is in a pulse, so imagine a little wave back and forth, up and down. That's what's happening here, is that wave is translated through that spring and diaphragm. Bam, 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 bam. Fuel inlet. Yeah, there's more to this. Where's the rest of it? Or excuse me. Fuel inlet. Diaphragm assembly. Oh no, they mailed me the wrong pump. Well, it is what it is. I'll get another one. These are pretty universal. I can probably just take this assembly off and right on here, and we'll call it good. On this one, fuel inlet goes through the top through that screened portion, comes out the bottom, goes to my carburetor. Vacuum driven pulse here. Now, water in the fuel, what is that going to do? And it's going to cause some issues. Those gaskets in there are not as resilient. You have springs, which can be prone to rust. As you can see, this one has slight powder coating to it. That doesn't mean that it won't rust. You can see, possibly see where some of the powder coat is worn off. That may have been a rust buildup or starting to happen. That's past the screen, so unless you have a secondary fuel filter, it's going to get into your carburetor and cause other issues. I can't believe I got the wrong pump. This is the same part, number 2. This is going to be a nightmare if it doesn't work. Yeah, this is the fuel outlet on this one. On mine, you can see that's just capped off. So we'll just swap the body. It ought to work just fine. Anyways, carburetor. Not going to get into details of this. There's tons of videos on the details of these. Two major components. You have the bowl assembly. You have the top part of the carburetor. You have your throttle plate, which opens and shuts. You have your idle inlet. You have your idle enrichment screw on this one. Throttle plate adjuster. This is the inlet for the main jet into right in front of throttle plate, and inside of the bowl assembly, you can probably see in there that little brass piece is the main jet. There's a dozen or so parts I didn't mention. Basic idea is Venturi effect of vacuum being pulled over. It pulls fuel out of the system. There's no real pressure inside the bowl, but there is fuel pumped into this idle. Right here, there's fuel pumped directly past the vacuum assembly, or past. So this is the vacuum side. Right into the vacuum side of the carburetor, I have fuel that's pumped through a tiny little orifice, and there's an enrichment screw. And in my case, no matter what I did with the enrichment screw, I could not adjust the RPMs or how she was running at idle, let alone get it to idle. So I had non-combustibles flowing through this area. I realized this. I shut the engine. I no longer continued to run the engine, took it apart, and there was some debris in here that had worked its way past the fuel pump. So in my opinion, if you are experiencing issues with fuel or water in your fuel, go ahead, replace your fuel pump with the correct one. And wait a second. Yeah, that is the wrong one. With the correct one, and clean the piss out of your carburetor. Watch someone else's video on that. I don't have the patience to do that. Take your time with it. When you do clean these, I recommend one thing: surgically clean. Seriously, as clean as you can. Clean them once a year. That's what I would do. I prefer my motor starting up and running right away. So now we've kind of talked about the fuel in the system, what it takes to get rid of it, what it does, and what it actually is. And there's a lot of these quick fixes you're going to see on the internet. A lot of quick fixes on YouTube about transferring oil or transferring fuel through some type of separator right back into the tank. Just draining your carburetor bowls, putting in some new fuel. Tons of these. I watched them. I was like, I'm going to see someone else talk about what I'm talking about. That's what I wanted to see, and I didn't see it. Well, except for one instance. But he didn't put as much stress on the need to clean everything and get it all up running properly. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to get on your boat. I want you to go fishing. I want you to turn the key, and the engine starts. It purrs. It shudders around a little bit maybe, but it gets up and going, and you run down the lake. Here's what I don't want you to happen. I don't want you to be 5 miles off the coast. You've got a gallon of fuel in the bottom of your 30-gallon tank, or of fuel water mixture in the bottom of your 30-gallon tank. You go and you hit full throttle, and you're 300 horsepower Evinrude blows itself up, because that's what will happen. Water separator is not going to help you in this instance. Another thing you can do, this is something you should do religiously, is when the boat's not in operation, plug the vent to the fuel tank. Constant vent, there's constant moisture working in there. Ethanol is unique. What's not? It's like rubbing alcohol. You put rubbing alcohol out, it evaporates pretty quickly. Let's think about that for a second. Basically, if I had a tank full of rubbing alcohol and I ran a fan over it, it's going to absorb the moisture. Let's say isopropic alcohol. It's going to absorb all the moisture that it can through the surface area that's provided in the amount of air that's going over it. So minimize that. In every instance, run your tanks, run them dead empty as much as you can. There's a lot of people that run a quarter tank, top it off. Well, if you're only running a quarter tank every time you go out, we'll do 4 trips, then top it off. If you're going to put the boat in storage all winter, plug the vent. Do everything you can to minimize atmospheric exposure to your gas tanks, and you'll minimize this problem. But if you do run into it, thoroughly clean the entire system and replace the gasoline. I have that 4 gallons I was talking about earlier. I've got to take it to a waste disposal facility locally. It's no good. I mean, if you want to use it to start a campfire or something, yeah, it'll burn what appears just fine. But when it's going through something that's engineered to burn it in a certain manner, I can't ever put systoic. In a proper air fuel mixture, it's not going to happen. Also, you're going to minimize the amount of oil that's getting through there. So probably the guys with the VRO system don't have to worry about or any kind of automatic oil injection, don't have to worry about the oil problem. But I premix, and as you can see, this is not premixed anymore. This is a dangerous combination of fuel. So thanks for taking the time to watch this. I'm going to put out a whole series on how to do side imaging and make a very neat, detailed bathymetric and side imaging mosaic map of a lake I don't want to do up here, but you're going to find it interesting. It's kind of a drive for me, but I'm going to do it because it's not a lake I'm familiar with. So I'm going to kind of take myself out of the comfort zone and put myself in your place. We're going to go out and make this map, and I'm going to fish a tournament on it later, and I'm going to show you how I use the different types of terrain and determine spots no one else would have ever found and blow the competition out of the water. That will happen. It's going to be fun, and everyone's going to be like, how the hell do you do that? We'll just watch. It's probably going to be about 2 months before I finish that whole series, but I'm going to put it out video by video and try to keep them around 20 minutes. Thanks for watching, and keep your gas dry. For anybody that was wondering, it took me about 3 minutes, and I swapped over the new assembly to that base plate, and the old base plate with the old outlet partition, I guess. New diaphragm, all that fit in just fine. So yeah, a little weird, but these things are pretty damn similar, so that'll work just fine.